It started out just being like intense gas bloating.
Right. I understand. Go away. Yeah.
And I said to Angela, I still had a gallbladder. I can tell you, I was having a gallbladder attack. Except it was like gallbladder hit here. This hit like just a little bit longer. And she said to me, so I texted my big sister, you know, Laurie, because they would probably be Rosalie's already done. So I'm like, listen. So it sounds like that was blessed. And I said, cool, that's not the our trip. That's urgent care. So at least the other trip. Like Angela.
You show up with a handicap?
Angela had to drive us home. Angela had to drive us home. It was a big mess. Anyway, I was just laying on the floor like a lump on a log because I'm hurt. And again a week later. Your Bailey. Yeah. No. But anyway, yeah. So we went, she goes, are you sure you don't want to go to the ER? I said, I don't want that bill. Let's go to urgent care. I'm voting for the easy thing. And then in urgent care, I was like, oh no, yeah, this is a business. And then urgent care was like, poke, we can't help you. You've got to go next door. That's literally what happened. And I was like, cool, why didn't we just wait on you for over an hour to do that? Like, there's a few guys in here waiting on COVID tests. And I'm like in the lobby going, they can't expedite our trip to the ER. No. And that's why I was able to go home the next day. Yeah, that was very blessing. Actually, they put me on the slow track because I was like, and then all night, I started getting hot at like 5 a.m. I was like, I'm sitting here, they have the fast track. And then they came and they're like,
so she was why you would have
snatched yesterday to spanker and I strained something.
Let's rock and roll. All right, so first things first. Memory verse. I think this is right. All right. Him we preach, warning every man and teaching every man all wisdom, that we may present every man perfect in Christ Jesus. I didn't know that was right, so I didn't state it from last week. So I'm right there with you. All right, so today we're on the capstone event, or at least the start of it. Zach graciously didn't volunteer, but agreed to teach next week. I'm going to be at a scout camp, so Zach's going to fill in, and it'll be great. So they're kind of divided up in halves here. All right, so it's supposed to be what we've hopefully learned or thought about anew, whatever, through this class. This week is kind of on the offensive. So you're presented with a situation and you're going forward into battle. And next week, it's more the battle's coming to you, defensive. People are more accusations against the church, against the Bible of Christ, and how you respond. So this week, we're on the move. All right. So just some slides from real early in the class. Today, we want to focus on kind of number 3 and number 4. How do we discuss these things with other people? So we've talked about, guarding our own hearts versus a lot of these things. But how do we and I want to have a candid discussion. So if a lot of these are opinions. I didn't rehearse, so that was good. A lot of these are opinions of how, if you're presented with a situation, how would you respond? Now, a lot of these, there's not X, Y, it's not a formula. So Stephen might have a different way of doing it than Zach, than Tim, and other people. So one way is not necessarily best. One way could be better than the other, but that's an opinion, and you and your comfortability, everything else, everything you have going on in their life, your situation. So just proceed with caution with a lot of these. And again, just have a candid conversation. You're in a safe place. Everybody here loves you, right? So if you got a question, you're like, hey, I'm terrified with this thing. I honestly don't know. I would like Jay didn't ring the doorbell. I would turn off the lights and hide. Like you can say that. That's okay. And like no one's gonna yell or throw anything at you intentionally, at least. All right. So just to recap quickly. So it's been a while since we talked about cults, but there's a reason that most of these religions were included in this class as opposed to we're just gonna have a class in Hinduism or Islam or whatever it is. It is because they share a lot of the same traits. Opinion-wise, that's what I think. That's what I'd submit to you. So what now that you've seen all of those, what are some traits you think that they share? Just throw them out there. Secret knowledge, very good. Yeah. The Vedas. My Hindu is terrible. That I didn't know that until I started studying it. They have their own wisdom books. Exactly.
It's usually to one person. Sometimes a very blind allegiance to that person.
Very much. Yeah. So we see those a lot, even with those more established religions too. Mm-hmm. Joseph Smith with the Mormons. Yeah, absolutely. It's a personality. Also.
It's based on feelings.
Feelings, very much so. Yep.
Secluded from other thoughts or ideas. Very much like she said, one person usually, but I mean, any other thoughts or ideas that might bring it up, shut it down, don't even listen to it.
Right. It's the consideration part of it too. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's big. We're going to go in kind of the counter in a second. Anybody else think of any? No big deal. So how does the church, and this again is more for probably next week than it is this week, but how does the church that we find in Scripture, how does that differ from a cult? Because if you remember in Scripture, there's it's referred to as a sect, and I mean almost the same verbiage as a cult. If anyone, again next week we'll talk about people's accusations against the church. Are they found? Or are they founded in truth, or is that a good way of looking at it? My argument obviously would be no, just based on the Bible. So again, our sole source of information is the Bible. We're not looking to someone else. And Joseph Smith's on my mind, but the secret. There's a sheet. He's telling you exactly what to believe. What to write, and she's writing it down. And now you have this book, and it's totally from him. It's none of that. It's just the Bible as it's been preserved. There's independent congregations, and everyone is accountable to God's law, especially the leaders. They're actually held on a higher standard that to be above reproach. So they don't. There are freedoms that they won't even take part in because it might give the appearance of potential sin. So they'll abstain from those things. And then that's open to everyone. I can come to Stephen. I can come to Jimmy and say, hey, I think maybe you might want to watch out for this. And that's encouraged and likewise reciprocated back to me and all of us. Personal accountability. And then even if a family member is a non-believer, you still have responsibilities to them. And that's something, and love, even Christians that have fallen away that no longer are following Christ, you have love towards them, and you don't have malice in your heart towards them. And then how we reason from the Scripture, not manipulation, not these different tactics that, you think of Islam in the Middle East. If there are penalties in many places of death, if you do not, repent and believe, that's not the way that God wants you to follow him. Any other thoughts? Can you help any others?
One thing that we have to talk about is kind of the chain of money.
Yeah.
The relationship of money in this whole thing. And so, and most of those you see that as far as some control over personal decisions with your money. That's much different here. You kind of see hints of that even with denominations where, hey, I need you to pledge, and now we're coming for it. You owe us this money. Yeah. It's all about free will offering in the church. It's truly your own cheerful giving that supports the church.
Right. Yeah. And to add to, usually in many of these, at least, there's also a sex component also. There's money, power, sex. Like there's, that trifecta is usually found within the thread of a lot of these too. Very good. So kind of a question to get our mind percolating here. How do you interact with somebody? And this is more not, I guess, maybe from a cult standpoint, but I'm thinking more from like Islam, Hindu, kind of our classic Billy. How do you interact with someone who is from a completely different culture and has totally different views of the world? I mean, just like talking to a Martian sometimes. Like, how do you balance, and where I was going with this, how do you balance being all things to all people that Paul talked about in 1 Corinthians 9 versus the mentality of shaking off the dust of your feet? Or I reference Acts 18:6, not going over this, Paul being here, but when they opposed him and blasphemed, he shook his garment and said to them, your blood be on your own heads. I am clean from now on. I will go to the Gentiles. So people actively pushing again. How do you reconcile those two mentalities? And tell me if this is a too vague of a question. I might not be phrasing it correctly.
I was going to say, there's a big difference between asking questions and then being combative. Usually, if you're talking, at least in my experience, whenever I shake the dust off of my feet is whenever they've been combative for a long time. Usually about 2 conversations. And if they started asking questions and they grow combative, or if they grow combative, usually if they do it more than twice, they're going to come back even harder next time, at least in my experience. So that's usually what happens when I say that, as compared to someone who's just genuinely asking questions. That's when all things to all people is when you try to meet someone who's actively trying to listen, right? You're not going to just, it's like trying to talk to a brick wall, right? You're not going to get anywhere versus just trying to mold some clay. You're going to get somewhere.
You're trying to judge, I don't mean judge in a negative sense, but you're trying to judge their motivations or their capacity for their motivation.
I think those online studies have been pretty show and tell of when people come when they just want to learn more about the Bible, or when they're wanting to justify their answers, or whenever they're genuinely asking because they want to know.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference between all 3 of those. And it all comes down to, why are you here?
That's a hard line.
Yeah, it is hard. And it takes multiple conversations to find out. So
that's good. Yeah.
Conversations with or anything, they're Catholic, and
right.
So you have to start with the basics. You can go in both.
Right. I mean, and it's exactly that type of recommendations that's what I kind of want to draw out here, because we want to be able to take these and not every situation can be different. So it's not cookie cutter, but be able to take those concepts and apply them to situations that we're all going to face. Yes, sir.
I think Paul, even in places like Titus 1, where he talks about the testimony being true of one of their own prophets. We don't want to just say, hey, every single thing you believe is wrong. That may not be the case. Right. I mean, there's elements of truth and things. So I think it makes a lot of sense to understand where those differences are, but agree where there's something to agree with. I agree with how the morality of the family that you have in the life and the way you raise your children in certain respects. I think that's very biblical. So hey, we have common ground there, and that's something you can kind of. I don't think you have to come out of the gate with this is where you're wrong. Right. I don't think that's very effective to form relations. I think that's really at the outset what I believe would work best is form a relationship where they understand that your motives are pure and that you really do care about that person. It's not just I'm here to win a debate.
Right. Yeah. Who's the actual winner of God? It's not. Exactly. And I mean, putting yourself in their, it sounds cliche, but in their shoes, how would you like to be treated in that? If you want someone to be combative with you from the first onset, probably not. Seeking first understand.
Yes,
great.
I think that's
an excellent point. You try to go in and if you go in with the wrong attitude right away, there's defensive that people start getting defensive and start trying to defend rather than honestly ask questions and understand. And I think that's something that we should do also is understand where they're coming from and where they're reasoning with them.
Right. That takes
rather than making them defensive up front. When you come in, like Stephen was saying, you come in and say, "Oh, you're wrong. You're completely wrong about everything." The first thing that's going to do is come back.
I heard a preacher one time was talking about, he's like, when you're in a Bible study with someone that's you think at least doing this with in scriptures, you can start a conversation by saying, well, either you're wrong and I'm right and you're wrong, or we're both wrong. It's one of those. And then, is there a possibility that you could be wrong? Sure, we can always be wrong. So let's always go back to validate and trying to make that the spirit of the study. Good. Yes, sir.
So you're talking here about a completely different culture, right?
Yeah.
Which, to me, I compare it to what the Hebrews were. Obviously, I'm teaching that class. And so they were leaving Judaism, coming into Christianity, and they were leaving everything. And so how did they approach those Jews to say, hey, the Messiah is here, but likewise, talking to like the interpreters we work with, right? So obviously with language barrier, you can talk to the direct guys, right? But talking about the basics of why we do what we do, and that is to be in unity with God. Whereas a lot of times what they do is out of fear, out of, even if their God was Bible to begin reading, that can be very dangerous for them. Yeah. But helping them to understand we're trying to be unified with our God who loves us and provide a way to reunite with him, that we're separated by sin, and just approaching it from what is our end goal versus you're wrong and, Allah is bad. It's one of those where approaching it and sharing with them why we do what we do, and then finding out if they're a brick wall or if they're at least open to a discussion.
Right. And sometimes it's so hard. Tell me if your experience is the same. I mean, culture-wise, American Western culture, for the most part, broad brush here, is very internal locus of control. I think that's how you say it, where it's I can control what happens to me for the most part, as opposed to fundamentally I have no say whatsoever with what happens in my life. And much of the third world country, or wherever you want to, Middle East, South America to some extent, a lot of the Asia, very much like I'm basically just at drift here. Whatever happens to me is Middle East, all is will, right? Whatever happens. The idea that I can study, I can come to a conclusion, I can do something of my own is hard. That's an alien concept. So even like those foundational levels, it's something you might have to get down to, which is extremely difficult.
Well, that's the thing with culture, right? Even on different societies, they all have, I guess, two main things that unite all people in every way. And that is purpose, because you're here. You have to have reason. Otherwise, people go absolutely crazy, no matter what culture they come from. And then the second one is that you will eventually die. And it doesn't, and those are two things that you have to always come to grips with, no matter where you come from, who you are, or what your parents said or anything. So that's the baseline of how you can start any conversation. Doesn't matter where anybody comes from, even if they believe they're a cog in a wheel, or if they believe that they're the center of the universe. Two extremes, they both have the same thing that they have to apply.
That's a great point. And there are some things morality-wise that are self-evident too.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
You can take extreme examples from history to say that morality does exist, but so it applies from cross barriers, across cultures. One thing that was always big, no matter where you go, what you look at, it's not always wrong to kill other people depending on the culture, but it was always wrong to kill your own. Why is that? Even cultures in the Americas before what European influence even got here, they made sacrifices of people, but it was always other people.
Yeah.
It wasn't themselves. Why is that? So just
some of the semblance.
Yeah.
Again, self-evident.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go.
All right. Well, just to add, so there are some basics. Everybody has fear. Everybody has something that no matter what culture you're from, you're afraid of something. Maybe it's death, maybe it's something else, maybe it's loss of a loved one, family. That's what Steve was talking about. And you can make these connections, but you sometimes have to prepare yourself on what is going to be important to them and let them really, like when you're having conversations, let them drive the conversation. Let them take you to where now don't let them take the thought there. Don't let them, and then eventually you can correct certain things, but yeah, let them kind of feel comfortable when you're having conversations with them, because if you're driving, you're not going to get anywhere because you're kind of forcing your thought there. Let them kind of ask the questions, or you ask the questions, let them kind of answer. Also, something that we did, try to use, maybe I mentioned this or not, try to use the language that they would use. Like when we spoke with Jehovah's Witnesses, call God Jehovah. That makes them feel comfortable.
That's a great point.
Because then they're like, they're bringing these barriers down, and they're like, oh, okay. And also when they come to your door, whether it's they come to your door or however you meet them or whatever, that's a bad day sometimes. They may have knocked on 15 doors, and I feel for what they're doing, because it's a hard thing to do. Get out there and see people, and you get the door slam in your face and everything. So at least give them a little bit of something, and try to. I struggle with this though, because I almost want to give them a, hey, good job, attaboy, but
you don't want to encourage the actual
with the wrong person, But I do try to actually have common ground on, hey, what you work really hard, and that's what I ascribe to do as well, and try to, and so I take some appreciation.
It's a super hard balance, and there's a JW question
here. Okay, and one more thing, I promise, last thing, and people don't buy things from people when you're in sales because of the product. Sometimes they buy it because of what?
That's what I've been doing wrong. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how you make a living.
Bringing up rare. It's all base pay. All right. That's what.
It's us too they're buying from, right? So
right. Yeah.
If you can't make a connection on some level with them at the beginning, any words come out of your mouth, no matter how good your product is. And this product right here, this is a true product that will save your eternal life. You're lost.
And a lot of people, I mean, maybe there's someone in here that would hear that and think like, yikes, like I'm an introvert. That sounds terrifying. Like it's completely on me, like it's all on me. Like it's me. And obviously and that's not what you meant. I'm putting words in your mouth a little bit just to make a point, but it's not you, it's God. And ultimately it's whether they're not accepting you, they're accepting God. And so you have to give yourself a little bit of grace. Now, be diligent, study, and put in the effort to be able to do the very best you can, but that takes diligence. And again, ultimately, your job is just to get the word in front of them, and you can't make them believe. So, understanding those conflicting points.
But the fact that you love and the fact that you care, those will shine through.
Very true. I agree. Right there, we got rapport. All right, so getting in to the meat. Kind of. All right, so your friend is convinced the world is run by a hidden elite, a hidden group. And so, okay, let me digress for just a second. I took kind of a semblance and picked a bunch of this stuff for all the different class material, but most of these, if not all of them, are based on real situations, like either I've encountered or someone has told me about or whatever. So this is blinded to protect whoever it is, but it's real. So your friend is convinced the world is run by a hidden elite. A hidden group has controlled the world throughout time and all realities that we think we know. Geopolitics, U.S. government, international wars, think Russia, Ukraine, our jobs, etc., are fake. Right? He professes to be spiritual and believes in the Bible. He also wants to talk about these topics with you because you're a Christian and should be educated about the world around you. How do you respond? Where would you start a study if you were to engage in one? And are there any guardrails on this study that you would put in place? Yeah. Yes.
I think you need to be focused. If he wants to talk spiritual, we'll talk spiritual.
Okay.
But don't follow the rabbit trails that lead into all of the other.
But it's all connected. What would you say something's like?
If it's not in here, stick with what we know.
You'd have to find some level of finding where that person is and seeing where the logical disconnect actually is. Like it? Yes.
I think with anything, it's about who's in control. You know, like read about this, that, and this, and that, what's going to happen. You know, God's in control. I mean, that's the basic answer. I mean, I'm not saying you're exactly right, but just the end of the question is your answer is God's in control.
Right. And finding, I would think maybe finding, do they believe that would be, and if not, then that's a whole nother conversation
right.
too.
That's true.
Yes.
No, I think just expanding on what Zach said, I think this feels like two different conversations. Like if they want to talk about spiritual things, let's go there. If you want to talk about, the hidden elite and conspiracy theories, like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's talk about it. But they're not the same thing. So I would just separate the
Gaining
two.
clarity and focus would be, because if not, I mean, can you imagine having a study like this? Like, what do you mean study? And I mean, I'm probably guilty of thinking like this too, where you're just like a dog chasing a squirrel, you're just all over the place. And that's not, it's a waste of time. It's not productive. See, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to mention that maybe on that spiritual discussion that Zach and Stacey were talking about, maybe we talk about, Romans 13. What is the Christian responsibility to the governing authority? Let's talk about what the Bible says about those things, and then talk about Ephesians 5:15. Are we redeeming the time? It says, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. So let's focus on understanding what the will of the Lord is. I'm one person. How much of my life should be consumed in trying to even discover these things? So I think separation is absolutely critical in the discussion, but go to the passage that talk about my duties in the civilian, community, right, in my nation.
Which would amaze most people. They're like, oh, because how can I be faithful to this government when it's controlled by all these, child sacrificing, whatever? And it's like, okay, well, I mean, this is talking about Rome.
Yes, And these conversations usually have a tinge of revolution. Yeah, there's some kind of uprising. And so this kind of squelches some of that. Like, what? Do you have the right to do that? So anyway,
that's exactly where I want. One thing, if I could, real quick. So, obviously this last one on my mind. I was reading 2 Timothy this week. If you go to 2 Timothy 2, starting 15. So this is something that kind of, if you ever run across a verse that you've had a problem on your mind and it just kind of takes the breath away because it's like, that's it. So 2 Timothy 2. So starting in 15, bear with me. But be diligent to present yourself approved by God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the truth of the word. Rightly dividing, meaning there are wrong interpretations you have to, we split hairs over things that need to have hairs split. In verse 23, dropping down, but avoid foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they generate strife. That there are some questions that aren't worth asking, that they could be a waste of time. And then the one that was just kind of stopping me dead in my tracks was chapter 3, verse 7. It's talking about some gullible women in this instance, but it talks about always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Someone that there's just a fire for, not really the word or truth, but for learning. And with all that learning, they're never able to see the truth. Like you're never able, like it's the purpose, it's the track of learning, and you don't ever get there. And that, like, I was like, that's it. That is the allure of the mystical that we've kind of, hopefully we've talked about. Yeah.
Noah lived in a world where the literal entire world was evil to the thoughts and intentions of their hearts. And his entire job was to prepare for his own salvation and the salvation of his family. It was not his job to run down the evil of the world.
Right.
It was just to do what God told him to do and to await salvation.
For a quiet life.
But I'm just going to go along with
the Old Testament examples where God has put those leaders and rulers in control for his purposes. You know, he'd raise up Babylon to take away the Israelites, etc. And just to Stephen's point, have that discussion with them. Hey, this is what God says about the rulers of this world. That's his choices. He gets to control that, not us. And then be content with what you do have and what your role is of working out your own salvation.
I had something very similar to Daniel 4, where he talked about the kingdom of, the God rules the kingdom of man. Either that's true or it's not. You know, kind of what it's like God is in control. Like you literally believe that or you don't. If he is, then there's a logical progression we have to go. We can't hold two separate conflicting thoughts in our mind. So very much, very good. All right. Sorry to jump. But. All right. So you work for a technology company and received this email mid-June from an executive in your company.
Just got this one. Oh, was this real?
This is real. It's been redacted to ensure future employment. All right, so June is when we honor Juneteenth. Now, notice in here, notice the mix of truth and error. Okay. So June is when we honor Juneteenth, a day that marks the end of slavery in the United States. June is also been recognized in the U.S. as Pride Month, commemorating the Stonewall Uprising of June 1969. Both of these represent two promising moments along the different pathway to obtaining human rights, equality, and belonging to for two groups that are often marginalized or persecuted. It is a time for reflection and celebration of both Black and LGBTQIA plus history and culture. We are committed to fostering a workplace that embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion here at Blank. I encourage each of you to take some time to learn about the significance of each of the above events, engage in conversations, participate in events, and support initiatives that foster inclusivity within our organization and beyond. By enhancing our understanding, we can become stronger allies and advocates for equality. At Blank, we honor Juneteenth by recognizing it as a company holiday in the U.S. On June 28th, join us in a celebration of Pride by coming to work dressed in the colors of the Progress Pride flag. And then there's a bunch of links that says below are some suggested resources that other ways you can engage. And the purpose of this isn't to talk about Juneteenth, it's to talk about Pride. And Pride is in the LGBTQ culture that we're seeing. Notice two separate things. We have racial equality, which is God sees no difference in man, it's not partial to any. And then we have something that is extremely simple that God has given commentary on and given direction on. And we're trying to mend them both together, but they're not of the same thing, right? So let's kind of, for clarity here, just talk about the LGBTQ part. So taking, and one of the articles or links over here is talking about pronouns at work. By simply offering your pronouns, you can become a better ally and help normalize gender equality and sexual orientation. Consider adding these to your email signature, your LinkedIn page, or social media. So a question for you. First off, what is your reaction, if any?
Deleted.
Thank you.
Market is a fishy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you come to work dressed in the progress? But what do you do?
Red, white, and blue, pretty nice.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Why not?
We cannot promote sin.
I'm not celebrating that.
Is there anything wrong with wearing a rainbow shirt?
Giving hearty approval to those that do sin. Romans 1.
And those that approve it.
Could wear. Autumn has a shirt that says we got it from the Ark. It's got a rainbow, taking the rainbow back. She wears it. I feel a little bit scared for her.
Yeah.
I mean, she's absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Is anyone? Maybe that's not something. Like I feel the exact same way. This, I could not ever in good conscience do that. I hate the fact that Julia is 9, my daughter, and she loves rainbows, and it's like it's a symbol from God, but that also has a connotation now.
Make sure it's all 7 colors.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
7 is God's complete number. The stuff they're using never uses all 7.
Yeah, that's my list.
Yeah.
Say that again. I missed it.
So the real rainbow has 7 recognized colors, and 7 pops up a lot in the Bible as God's complete number. But the pride flag only uses 6.
What's missing?
What's the progress?
Indigo. It's always indigo.
Really?
Yeah. But they have pink on.
Yeah.
If it's one thing to learn from this class, here we go. So what about pronouns on your signature block?
You know,
This sounds very like that's dumb,
Yeah.
but like or well, that doesn't matter. That's not a big deal. Like what do y'all think about this?
okay. English person. First of all, you don't get to hijack the English language like that. Then, when this stuff first started, it was like, okay, annoying, but you're trying to be polite to people. But then as this has gone on, you realize that it's just, it's a hostage situation. And we cannot see lies through our language. So they're using language to tell lies. So they're saying, you cannot use that word because it doesn't mean that anymore. You're like, no, that's a lie. So I cannot participate in a lie, even if it hurts your feelings. So I can be polite about it and just say, no, thank you. I'm not going to do that. I don't agree to the ideology that comes behind this loaded.
There are meanings to the words you're using.
Very loaded thing you're asking me to do. So this is a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I will not bow down.
And that takes a lot of courage too. Yes.
And I know this is really kind of hyped up and it's on everybody's mind.
Right, it's very political.
But all of these, this is nothing new. I mean, when the people come by at work, and say, hey, I want you to contribute to Salvation Army. Hey, I want to sell you a raffle ticket for this. Or I mean, there's a lot of things that, hey, we're going to have this get together and, we need you to bring whatever, but it's something you shouldn't bring, whatever it's like. Just say no. Yeah. I'm going to bear up under the consequences of whatever, because God is watching over me. And so I just say, no, I'm not going to participate. They go, why? Well, I'd love to tell you why. Would you really want to know why? Because I'd love to tell you why, but let's talk about that over lunch or something. It's okay. If I get fired over it, I get fired over it. God will provide for me. You just have to have faith that it's going to work out. Don't be scared, but also don't be combative. I mean,
I was going to say, don't reply all.
No.
Yeah.
And this is a private business, public, whatever. They have a right to do it. I'm working here, and I have the choice to leave too.
Very much.
I'm not living in a country where I have no choice. I don't have a choice. So
absolutely. And those are all considerations you have to take into mind. And I mean, these are very personal decisions too. And I mean, you have to weigh all these different considerations in it. So no one's saying it's easy. One second.
Yeah. Sometime last year at my job, all the members of management were encouraged to put those pronouns in my statement. And they're like, well, highly recommend. I go, well, you can highly recommend, but I'm choosing not to. And they gave me pushback, but everyone else.
Yeah.
But I'm like, and what's really hard is when you have one of them on your team. It's a hard balance. But
I appreciate sharing. It's not easy to. Yeah, I actually face these things. So absolutely.
I think it's interesting though, because obviously, most of us know Carrie pretty well by now. You can work with these people, treat them with respect, but not, give into the lies and use the pronouns. So, there's not really any kind of reproach that they can bring upon you for, just treating them with dignity and kindness like you would anybody else.
Yep, absolutely. You raise a hand in this class.
What I was just going to say that there is a ton of emotion around this and very political, right? And to Stephen's point, if you get fired or if you have to leave that employment, God is going to provide, right? You always have to have that in the back of your mind. Does us no good to raise our voice and get emotional about it. There is a point to being passionate and sharing our love of Christ and teaching people. But these kind of conversations always get passionate my experience, and it does you no good to return fire in the same way, right? And so that's the hard part about knowing when to walk away, but doing so in a respectful and loving manner that, you know, hey, I know what I believe and I know what the Bible teaches, and that's how I'm going to live my life. But at the same time, I don't know why you feel the need to bring your sexual orientation into the workspace of medical sales or whatever workplace, right?
I'm not saying that this is from that.
Yeah. but like that's where, just me personally, it's like, and it's going down to the curriculum in schools. It's like, I understand why they're doing it, because the devil is walking about as a raging lion, right? That if he can influence children, right, then he's got them for life, essentially. And so pushing back in a respectful, loving manner is the key, but understanding that God will provide, and if you gotta leave the company, you gotta leave the company. Yeah. But you cannot show that support by wearing the pride flag. You cannot show putting your pronouns in the, and if there anything wrong with saying he, him, no. But that is then lending support to their movement and cause. That's my 2 cents. It's just try to keep emotion out of it as much as possible when you're having those discussions. And when they continue to push back, it's, well, you know, we're here to do job A, not discuss sexual orientation.
Right. And then, hands up. Thank you, Mr. Kelty.
I'll wait till I'm caught on. I think all of us have gotten pretty good at dealing with homosexuality that way. You know, we have someone on our team who is, and we treat them with respect. Of course, like, they're an equal team member and very good at their job, and respect them for that. Transgenderism adds the wrinkle of this person wants you to validate them and refer to them with these sets of pronouns, with this gender-focused name, in which case, like, talking to that person, you're going to use pronouns. That's just the way we speak. And so, how do you use those pronouns in a respectful way? Or do you choose to refer to them by a different gender that they don't want to be referred to as? A lot of wrinkles into that makes dealing with that community
very complicated. Yeah. And I think it's really easy for me to sit here and say, like, you can never ever put he him, but yeah. But I think that might be a little bit, that's probably too far. But I think conscience plays a huge part in this. You
know, one way you might do it is just, I would just address that person by their name, by their given name. I'm not gonna, and there's a reason why I said I talked to someone over lunch, because I'm not gonna do that during the work hours, right? You need to protect yourself. And so not be accused of something they're ready to pounce. So hey, we're person to person, we're not at the workplace anymore. I'll be glad to talk with you about, you know, my understanding of the scriptures, of why I'm not participating in these things, and you know, all those kind of things. This love the person who's transgender, just like we would they have access to the gospel, right? So they need the gospel just like I need the gospel. So but I think that's the only way I can solve it. And what gets me is, well, what if they say, I'm not Charlie, I'm Clarice now?
And she calls everybody friend. Yeah.
You
person.
So to bring up Zach's point, to state the obvious, you're dealing with someone who has either a severe mental health issue and or is ideologically possessed, meaning that this ideology has become an ingrained cult-like faith.
That's why I included.
So that's a double mental smack. And so absolutely needs the gospel, absolutely needs love, and this love is truth. Truth is love. And so it is a delicate balance. But you meet someone in that position, and my thought was, oh, how messed up has your life been? Yeah. Like, I felt so much empathy for that human being. I was like, oh my gosh, your life has been so traumatized at this point. You just need someone to love you, like to actually love you.
And part of this too,
that's what I was gonna say. Just respect the person and feel for them, because they make those choices where they, I mean,
community,
right? I mean, feel for them. They need God's love, and they don't. But they don't know.
Absolutely. And part of the other reason I want to include this, not just belabor this, but this is something that we all deal with as adults in this country in this time. So don't think you're on an island. If you have these thoughts, you're like, I have no idea. Or if you're tempted to, I'll wear it just because there's going to be a picture and like I don't want to be the only one. Like you have people here to talk to and lean on. Yeah.
Always told my kids, this is, I said, there's more people that absolutely do not go along with this, but they're scared and they're afraid. They don't need their people. So don't be afraid to stand up. Maybe there'll be encouragement to others,
right,
which we're supposed to be.
How blessed are we that the biggest concern we have is we might have to change jobs? I mean, in this country,
unemployment's like 4% or something.
We're getting to jail time, so we can see God's blessings in situations we're in.
Yeah.
That awkwardness and I might have to change jobs is like the biggest
problems. Yeah.
problems.
Yeah. All right. No, thanks for the conversation.
Right.
So
one more thing. Once you start going down the road though, where you go against your conscience and do things that are where you're like, well, I'll just do this one thing, even though it burns me up inside, it's just going to get easier and easier and easier to just keep going and going. And you're going to look up and you're going to be doing things that are completely wrong at some point.
Or you're just so lukewarm.
Yeah, you don't have a stance on anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I struggled with this for the longest time. I was like, what in the world do some of these items have together with each other? Like you said at the beginning, like they're so unconnected. And sometimes you may get an email like this and it may have, I don't know, it may have something regarding climate in there. You may have something that's totally unconnected. Well, these things don't stand alone very well. They're not strong enough. Right. So a lot of these groups and some, I'll use the big C word. I think it's communist activity where it's taking, and I don't know. No, but, and this is not me going back to the other slide where I'm the crazy person, but listen, these oppressed groups have to combine together to have power. And if you look over here at the corner, this is where it really comes for us quickly, the destruction of the family.
Yeah.
And it's coming. It's coming right for us. And this is where they get power. We have to destroy the family first. So, Steve, the points you made just a minute ago.
5 seconds.
Fantastic. That's a lot to say, and I'm done.
All right. When I first read this from wherever I found it, what made me, just one last point, what made me mad was that they combined Juneteenth with this. It's like, these are two separate units, like I can get behind one and one's like, oh, this hurts my conscience completely, So anyways, just correct. Yeah. Mixing truth and falsehood. Right. Okay. All right. So you started having spiritual conversations with a Mormon friend at work. Good for you. One day she says that the Mormon church is simply trying to go back to the church that Jesus started in the first century and get away from all of man's corruption and fall. Sounds like a familiar concept, right? She says that God's message wasn't complete until Joseph Smith received the final revelation. How do you respond? You're having just a conversation, not over coffee, That was a joke.
Well, what did the people in the first century think? Because Jude 3 wrote that the gospel was once for all handed down.
Yeah. Okay.
So they thought they were done. They had it all.
Good, very good reference. Very good reference. So Jude 3. What else? What do we think? Any questions you would ask? I would go. Oh my God, I get ahead of. Some of the questions I might ask: was the first century church set up like the current Church in Mormon? Like I'd be curious to see what their answer was to that. And was it always God's plan to give revelation to Joseph Smith? If so, why did he say that it was complete in Galatians 1 that we quoted several times, and 2 Timothy 3:16 that word of God is complete and man may be thoroughly equipped. It's not thoroughly equipped. Why did he say that? So those types of things, and that prophecies will cease. 1 Corinthians 13. What else? Am I missing anything?
It interests me to inquire people like this about things like I've noticed that in recent times that it seems like the people of the Mormon church are getting away from the name Mormon. They want to be called Latter-day Saints.
Okay.
Tell me about that. Why is that? And, when you think through some of the answers that people possibly give to questions like that, you really start noting that within their so-called professed faith, there's changes. You can go back. I've got a Book of Mormon from several decades ago, different in some respect from the Book of Mormon that they might hand me in my living room.
It's interesting.
Always keep the old ones.
Yeah, and those are things that you can just kind of bring out and ask about, and note that if they really are interested in learning how has God preserved His Word, we can look into that together.
Yeah,
right? It's a platform to move forward in the study. Looking at Galatians chapter 1 is always an important start, I think, to a study like that, recognizing what is revelation from God.
Right.
The CES letter, CES, is this 300-page white paper thesis on problems with the history of the Mormon Church, problems with the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith personally, and that a former Mormon compiled. These are problems I have found in our faith, and he sent it to the leadership of the Mormon Church and got zero response. And the CES letter has helped a lot of ex-Mormons kind of break away from. Okay. So if you want to find something that you can ask, the CES letter has it broken down. Like, here's the problem with the Book of Abraham. Here's the problem with Joseph Smith's life. Here's the problem with the translation problem. Why was Joseph Smith reciting words that the translators had included in the King James Version? Stuff like that. And so
Martin Luther's.
Basically, yeah. You can just Google it, see the letter CES, letter Mormon, and you can find the whole PDF of it. And it's like 300 pages long. Yeah. Is there a YouTube video? I'd probably.
Well, just to fall on Kyle's point, because this is applicable to other denominations. Like the Methodist Church right now is going through a huge split over the LGBTQ, right? But there's also folks within that movement that are splitting because they were never comfortable with women preachers. And so pointing out that the evolution of their denominations, thought patterns, and belief systems that evolved over time, and pointing to, well, here's the truth, that hasn't evolved over time, and pointing them back to that consistent message from the New Testament church that we have. And like Kyle said, why are y'all distancing yourself from this, and trying to understand their thinking and then go through that discussion.
All right, real fast. We'll see if we can get to this. If not, Zach can get it. All right. So essentially, not going to read it. You're going to go out to eat. You got a boss. It's like a group dinner. You got a boss that he knows you don't drink. There's a Sunni Muslim that works there. He's an engineer. He doesn't drink either. Boss is like, sweet. I can avoid a problem. Put y'all both together. Bam. All right. All right. Zach will pick it up next class. I really want to see what y'all thought about this. I really did. Workshop.
Yes.
Yeah. See? Yeah. All right. Thanks. Okay, but exactly. Yeah. Yeah.